Hi everyone. So these days we all have been hearing about this term virus a lot. And of course, before this outbreak, we all were kind of familiar with this term virus. But these days, it's kind of everybody is, calling this word out. Um, for people who have studied biology or life sciences, they kind of know that what a virus is and how it is different from other life forms. But for a layman, even I have heard this a couple of times that people think that insects, viruses, bacteria, they all are the same thing. And of course, even people think that a virus is a living organism, and this is not absolutely and totally true. And of course, viruses are not at all related, or they are not at all alike bacteria and insects, because there was this time when we had a sanitization drive in our area, and people were saying that this machine is killing mosquitoes which cause COVID-19. So there is a misconception that is there in the minds of people about the meaning of virus. So if anybody were to answer what a virus is, it's not simple. It's not at all simple, because viruses, they are not cells. Like cells kya hota hai? Now again, for people who don't understand what a cell is, every living organism is made up of cells, right? And viruses do not have cells. So what do viruses have? So before we understand what do viruses have, this is just just an introduction to the concept of cells. So we understand that cells are fundamental to the living systems. Every living organism has cells. Your eyes have cells, your feet have cells, your hands have cells, your liver has cells, your heart has cells. So cells are there. They are the functional and structural unit of our body. Now, essentially, there are two types of cells, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. So the difference, there is a whole lecture that can be given on the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. But just for the purpose of this video, the basic difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell is the location of its genetic material. Now, what is a genetic material? Uh, we know that living things have the capacity or the ability to reproduce, that is to give birth or to produce young ones of our own kind. And this property, this process is possible because we have genetic material, and this genetic material is essentially passed on from parents to the young ones, now be it plants or be it animals. So, genetic material again is of two types, DNA and RNA. We all have DNA as the genetic material, and DNA is present inside our cells. So, if the DNA is present inside an organelle, and this organelle, let's not just make this complex. So, when DNA is present inside a nucleus, the cell is eukaryotic cell. And when DNA, or when the genetic material is not surrounded by nucleus, and when it is not enclosed in nucleus, it is just present uh, without any enclosure, then the cell is prokaryotic cell. So the basic difference between these two cells is that in eukaryotic cell, the genetic material is enclosed inside a nucleus, and in a prokaryotic cell, the genetic material is not enclosed inside the nucleus. Now, there are some similarities between these two types of cells as well. That is, they all are bounded by a barrier which is called plasma membrane, and they all have genetic material. So that's the similarity, and the difference is the location of the nucleus. So, for example, we humans are eukaryotes because our genetic material, which is DNA, is present inside our cells. So, yeast, birds, you know, uh, uh, trees, plants like mango tree, banana tree, banyan tree, and fish, whale. insects, these are all eukaryotes. Now the example of prokaryotes is bacteria. So when we say that this disease has been caused by this bacteria, it means that the disease has been caused by a prokaryote, and a prokaryote is a cell that that does not have a nucleus. So that's the basic difference between living cells. So eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells are both living cells. And why do we call them living cells? Because these cells are able to reproduce, because these cells have all the equipment present inside their inside their selective membrane, this plasma membrane. They have everything that is required to divide and to reproduce. However, now virus is neither a eukaryote nor a prokaryote. It is not even a living cell. So this debate has been going on for so long. And when the viruses were discovered, they were actually called poison. So in Latin, so there was a word in Latin which means poison, and hence we have this word in English called virus. And why poison? Because these particles are very infectious, that they cause infections. They carry certain types of infection and they are able to spread it from one person to another. Now, it's very interesting that these particles are structures, and what they have is a genetic material and a protein coat. So genetic material, again, it could be DNA or RNA, and they have a coat which is made up of proteins. So proteins are biomolecules. So we have different biomolecules, and proteins are one such biomolecules. So, but here I have written that they are a little more than a genetic material and protein code, because they have, at times, some viruses, they also have different structures. So, uh, so these cells, they have a very special property that they cannot reproduce outside a host cell. So when a virus is present inside its host, only then can it multiply, only then can it reproduce, because it hires the machinery of the host cell for reproducing. Now, if a virus is present outside a host cell, let's say if it is present on plastic or wood or any metal, then it is not reproducing, it is not making copies of itself. So in that sense, we call it non-living. Now, but when it is inside a cell, when it is inside its specific host cell, it does not mean that it has to be inside any cell. It has to be inside a specific cell, which it infects, and then it hires the machinery of that cell for its own benefit. Now, if there was a scientist who called virus as as someone who leads a kind of borrowed life. So why borrowed life? Because when it is inside its host, only then can it show properties of a living form. Now, as we have understood that viruses have genetic material and protein code, there are some viruses which also have an envelope surrounding them. Now, what is this? What this envelope is generally made up of? It is made up of phospholipids and some proteins. Now, just like proteins, they are biomolecules. Phospholipids are also certain biomolecules. Now, properties of phospholipids is different from that of proteins. So now here we have understood that virus is neither a prokaryote nor a eukaryote. It is not a cell. It is an infectious particle. It cannot reproduce outside a host cell. It's exists in an area. It's in a shady area between life forms and chemicals. Why chemicals? Because it's a particle which is made up of chemicals like DNA or RNA and proteins. Now, viruses lead a kind of borrowed life, and some viruses have genetic material, protein coat, and envelope. So envelope is generally made up of phospholipids. Now, here is a very simple artwork for coronavirus, because coronavirus, we have been hearing a lot about it. So coronavirus is a virus which has RNA as a genetic material. Now, genetic material could be DNA or RNA, but coronavirus, it has RNA as its genetic material. So here is the genetic material, and this and it also has proteins, and these spike structures, they are called spike proteins. And this membrane, this mauve shade membrane that I have made is the envelope, and this envelope is made up of phospholipids. And now presence of this envelope is actually a benefit to us, because the presence of this envelope is actually helping us to get rid of this virus by washing our hands with soap. And this is an entirely different mechanism on which I'll make the next video, that how uh, washing hands actually help in getting rid of the coronavirus. So now this is the generalized structure of the coronavirus. And now because it has RNA as a genetic material, it is more prone to mutations. Mutations are sudden changes in the genetic material. It is only that, certain types of virus, they have RNA. Other than that, all living forms have DNA as their genetic material, and also many viruses also have DNA as their genetic material. But there are certain viruses, for example, coronavirus, this class of virus has RNA as the genetic material, and RNA viruses are very prone to mutations because they are less stable than DNA. Now we know that coronavirus cause diseases like COVID-19, and they are also known to cause diseases like SARS and MERS. This is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and this is severe acute respiratory syndrome.